Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. After spending the past several weeks crisscrossing the state to visit different county fairs, we've arrived this week at the State Fair of Oklahoma. Of course, there's a lot of fun to be had here, but for some folks, young people especially, arriving at the state fair is evidence of just how hard they've been working all year long.
Well, it's awesome. It's a huge fair. They've got lots of great ag booths and cattle shows and horse shows and, you know, the Wild West show and of course all the rides and the food vendors. Those are always the best parts. Well, with the Wild West show, we're Wild West entertainers is what you could say, trick riders and trick ropers, Roman riding. It just brings back the tradition and lets everybody see kind of what things used to be like that they don't get to see as much anymore. We don't have a lot of Westerns on TV, so it lets kids see it and can appreciate how, life used to be. The audience really seems to love it. The kids love the trick riding and the fire with the Roman riding, and of course, it's all just a lot of fun, and we take a lot of pictures afterwards and have big meet and greets, and they get to meet some of the animals. They really seem to enjoy it.
The arena one more time.
We'll have more from the State Fair coming up a little bit later in the show. But first, some timely advice for those of you getting started with canola planting. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our Extension Cropping System Specialist, Josh Lofton.
Planting dates are arriving across Oklahoma for many crops, and Josh, we're here in a canola field and we have some volunteer canola.
Yeah, well, it is planting time. It's time to start for canola. This is the best time. Usually we like to see that little sweet spot, the honey spot, is around the 20th to the 25th of September.
Talk about some of the soil requirements for canola.
Yeah, so we need the moisture, right. And it was great. And just a couple years removed from the drought, we're never going to complain about it. We'll secretly grimace at it, but we're never going to complain about it. But in a conventional tilled field like this, what we like to see is just being able to get good seed soil contact, putting that seed in the ground, making sure that you got a little bit of dry ground and a little bit of wet ground to be able to close in that seed bed and being able to get that good press wheel action. We need the moisture, but yet the moisture can do us wrong if we're a little early on planting. For the no-till guys, crusting is typically not as big of an issue, especially if it's a very historic no-till field. Guys that have been in no-till for a lot longer, it's a lot more resilient to crusting. We can get it in. But the thing you always have to worry about in no-till is it's typically a lot wetter. Right. With a half-inch rain, it typically stays wetter longer because it doesn't have the wind blowing across it, doesn't have that direct heat, and so the evaporation isn't as great with it, so we have to hold off maybe another day or so. The one thing we also got to worry about is the residue. Right. And a lot of folks go right on to the soil. They start kicking the soil around and say, the soil is great, we can plant into it. But the residue typically holds on to moisture a whole lot longer than the soil does. If you don't have trash cleaners, if you're just working on a coulter to actually cut through that, it's not going to do it. And it'll just bend that residue. If you got moisture on the soil surface, it'll bend that residue, and it's what we call hairpinning. It'll put that residue into the seed furrow. Essentially, it can wrap around that seed, and that seed can rot.
Now, once the seed gets in the ground, plant comes up, there's going to be some issues with insects once the plant comes up.
Yeah, this year is just like last year. Last year we kind of got caught off guard. We were looking for it this year, and what we found is pretty much the same as last year. And we have some volunteer canola here. And you see right here, this is a great circumstance. Wow. We got a worm sitting right there feeding on some of this volunteer canola. We don't recommend going canola into canola, so you wouldn't have to worry about canola here. For our no-till guys, they like to hide under that residue. Make sure you're peeling back some of that residue and seed, because right up the road here we had a no-till field, peeled back the residue. We had about 3 or 4 just sitting under that residue mat.
Okay, thank you much, Josh.
Thank you.
And for more information, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu. But first, a wheat planting update with David Marburger.
Well, according to the USDA report that came out on Monday, they have us pegged at about 19% planted for the state, and that's up about 15% from last year and about 8% from the 5-year average. We're kind of looking at the fertility side of that. One of the recommendations that we're trying to give is to go out and soil sample, especially if you haven't in a while, because we know we are going to try and reduce the amount of inputs wherever we can, and some of that could be fertilizers, but you kind of need a place to start to know whether or not you need fertilizers or not. In terms of the enriched strip, I would still suggest going out and putting out an enriched strip. Even if you're not going to put down nitrogen, or as much nitrogen maybe this fall, having that nitrogen strip out there could help us later on when we get into spring. And if we make the decision that we want to take this crop for grain, we have that reference strip out there, and we will know how much nitrogen we will need to put on and be able to pencil that out to see where we can try and best make the most profit that we can. Margins are going to be very tight this year, and my biggest piece of advice this year has been focusing on the basics, our basic agronomic practices, those things that we have the most control over, and trying to do those the best we can to help give us the best chance at trying to make a profit this year.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, another sort of lackluster week in the wheat markets. Give us the latest on prices.
You looked at KC wheat contract, a 10-cent move this week was a big move. The good news is that that contract price is up around $4.20. It's got resistance at $4.25, so we're right against that top. The strong resistance is at $4.30. If we can pop that, then I think we got a little ways to run. Now that contract has support at $3.95, so you got about 25 cents risk in the market right now. You look at the corn contract, it's right around for that December CBT contract for corn, right at $3.40. That's the resistance, the support at $3.15. So you got about 25 cents risk in it, and that corn may pop that $3.40 this week, and maybe a little run there. If you look at the soybeans, that November contract's at $9.80. It's got resistance at $10, strong resistance at $10.20. So I'd really watching the $10.20 rather than the $10. It's got support at $9.40. So you got about 40 cents risk in the beans, but all those markets are just wallowing around right now.
How are wheat export markets shaping up?
Well, they're, especially for hard red winter wheat, they're looking really good. Hard red winter wheat export sales since June 1 is 85% higher than last year. This week, Morocco bought 140,000 metric ton. That's a little over 5 million bushels of hard red winter wheat. The report I saw is that is feed wheat, and maybe we'll get some of this wheat out of some of these bunkers that we got in the state. And of course, I think that'll help prices. You look at all wheat export sales, they're 23% above last year, so wheat exports have been looking relatively good.
Now, of course, corn harvest is underway. Let's look at how actual yields are meeting expectations.
Well, right now they're below expectations, and I'd say that's relatively good news for wheat, and probably corn prices bottom out. We got a lot of the harvest to go yet, but right now we're projecting 15.1 billion bushels of corn crop. The last record was 14.2. Last year was 13.6. So we can lose quite a bit on yields and still be above last year and still have excess corn. If you look at the world, 40.4 billion bushels. The record was 39.9. Last year was 37.8. So the world doesn't have as much excess corn as we do, but there's still a little more than we need.
Of course, a lot of wheat planting going on right now. It's always great to see the green popping up in the field. But what's on the mind of producers kind of all across Oklahoma? How long will these grain prices stay below the cost of production?
If you look at the records and over time, the general rule of thumb is wheat prices, it takes 2 years for them to clear the market and get back up. Corn can do it in 1, but we both know that weather is going to be the determining factor. Right now, I'm really nervous. I think the soonest that we could expect that would be September, October of 2017, and it may be 2018 in September, October before we get those prices up in the $5, $6, or $7 range.
Kim, always great to see you. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Another week of baking in the heat for Oklahomans. The third week in September kicked off with some brutally hot days. At least things cooled as we crawled into the weekend. Monday's heat indexes climbed above 100 in many locations across Oklahoma. The highest was 110 at Lane and Valiant in the southeast. The heat index on Monday was at 100 or more from just past the Texas border east to the Arkansas border. For cattle, the Cattle Comfort Heat Index on Monday hit 116 at Ardmore and Medill. 8 other locations came in at 115 on the Cattle Comfort Index. Not a single Mesonet site had a Cattle Comfort Index value below 100 on Monday. What a stressful day right after a spell of milder weather and rain over the weekend. The moisture that helped give us rain last weekend lingered in the form of high dew point temperatures. Tuesday at 2:30 in the afternoon, green areas had dew point temperatures in the upper 60s and lower 70s. More typical in the third week of September are dew point temperatures like those that were in the Panhandle, 40s or lower. The weekend rains provided good rain amounts in many southern areas. Unfortunately, there wasn't as much rain in the northern half of Oklahoma. Light blue areas had a half inch or less. Green areas had an inch or more of rain. Antlers in the southeast collected 3 1/10 inches from Thursday morning to Tuesday morning. Hopefully, with our next round of rain and cooler temperatures, it will actually stay cooler. Thanks for joining us for this edition of your Mesonet Weather Report.
There's a lot of wheat going in the ground right now, and Daryl, what's that mean for cattle production?
Well, there is a lot of wheat. The USDA reported this week that I think our wheat plantings were up to 19%, up from 1% a week ago. So a lot of action right now. Wheat's going in. It's early. We've got moisture. There's a lot of wheat already up, some of it up significantly. So the bottom line is we're a little ahead of the game as far as getting wheat established this fall.
Now, how does that help with the potential of lower cattle prices?
Well, if you look at the wheat side of things first, obviously with the wheat market where it is and expectations where they are, we're pretty sure there's going to be a lot of interest in grazing wheat, not only for the winter, but maybe already knowing that we're going to be thinking about grazing out wheat next spring. That sets up the idea that there's going to be a lot of interest. And because the conditions have been good to get wheat established early, we really got a jump start on that. And so it all translates into a lot of potential activity here in the next month or so, in particular on the stocker cattle side.
Now, let's talk about the potential for Oklahoma grazing.
Well, again, I think we'll see a lot of grazing. Obviously, we got to get this crop up, and producers are being a little bit cautious. They're going to wait and make sure we get it up. Early planted wheat has a lot more potential problems, so, we can have, insects that wipe out the crop. We can have more disease issues. So there's still some production issues on the wheat side, but cattle markets have been a little soft recently. We think they've bottomed now, and I actually think on the lightweight calves that we're going to see a little bit of strength in this market because we're going to see some increased demand here in the next month or so. We know there's going to be a bigger fall run of calves coming to town. The bulk of that will hit in the last part of October and early November, but there may be some demand for cattle ahead of that actually puts some support back in this market.
So there's actually still room for growth in the cattle markets. It's not saturated.
No, I think that's right. There's a lot of opportunity there, and one way to look at the softness we've had in cattle markets recently from a stocker perspective is that it really presents probably a buying opportunity for producers right now. That may, again, we may see that market pick up. There's everybody trying to do the same thing in a short period of time will potentially have an impact in the market.
Well, thank you very much, Daryl. Daryl Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Cow-calf producers in Oklahoma have been fortunate this year in most cases to get adequate amounts of rain and therefore lots of standing forage available for these cattle as we go into late summer and fall and even into the winter months. That means to me that many with spring calving operations will be choosing to use high protein supplements in small packages in order to just supplement the standing forage that's available for these cows. The question then comes, do we have to feed it every day, or can we reduce labor, reduce fuel and equipment costs by feeding less frequently, but making sure that the cattle get the same amount of supplement? Well, that experiment has been done here at Oklahoma State University back in the 1990s, where they took a set of cows. There was a little over 60 cows in each one of the groups. One group was fed 6 times a week. The other group was fed only 3 times a week, but both got the same amount of supplement over the course of the full week. You see, as they started in November, and each group got 21 pounds of a 40% crude protein supplement. One of them, as we said, fed 3 times a week, the other fed 6 times a week. Once they got to March after calving, they increased the amount of supplement up to the equivalent of 4 pounds per head per day, or 28 pounds over the course of the week. And then they dropped it back down as green grass started to come on in late April going into May. As they looked at the performance of these cows, they really found no difference. The weight change was virtually identical, whether we looked at those that got supplemented 3 times a week or 6 times a week. The body condition score loss was again virtually identical. 1 full body condition score from about a midpoint 5 down to a midpoint 4 is what occurred. As we looked at the pregnancy percentage after the upcoming breeding season, the cows that got fed 6 times a week versus the cows that got fed only 3 times a week, the pregnancy percentage after the breeding season was over again was virtually identical. So I think that we can save a few dollars and a few hours of labor, if we choose to, by only feeding these cows about every other day, making sure they get enough supplement to meet their daily requirements. Now, I understand that some producers still may want to see those cattle every day. And in that case, it may be okay to go ahead and take the supplement out so that they can bring all the cattle up to count them and make sure that everything's okay. But if you have that remote pasture that's hard to get to, and it's going to be time consuming and increase your costs, then looking at this interval feeding may be a real option for you to consider this winter. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
In Vet Scripts this week, Dr. Barry Whitworth looks at a virus that could affect show pigs.
We've known about a virus that occurs in pigs since the late 80s. The name of that virus is Seneca Valley virus, or Seneca virus A. And this virus infects pigs. It normally doesn't cause much of a problem. But in 2015, we saw an increase in the number of cases, and we also saw that the disease was worse than it has been in the past. Now, the biggest problem with the disease is that it mimics other diseases that we're concerned about, such as foot and mouth disease, swine vesicular disease, and vesicular stomatitis. Now, the typical signs that you will see with this disease is you will see vesicles or blisters form on the snout. You'll see these also form around the coronary bands of the pig. We also may see some ulcers around those feet. And these pigs typically don't want to eat, they'll have a fever, and they'll lay around. Now, as I said before, typically these resolve rather quickly, except this past year we saw this disease be much worse than it has been in the past. Our main reason for to alert people is that we saw this quite a bit in show pigs last year, and we want all our show pig producers and those that are going to be showing pigs to keep an eye on their pigs. If you see any of these clinical signs, lameness, you see those vesicles on the snout or on the feet, you need to contact your veterinarian and have him look at that pig before you transport him to a show. For more information about Seneca Valley virus, please visit the SUNUP website.
We're here in the Butterfly House at the Oklahoma State Fair, the perfect place to talk about a new research partnership aimed at protecting monarchs. SUNUP's Curtis Hare has this story.
There's been a lot of concern about monarchs and habitat availability. They're being considered for listing as threatened under the Endangered Species Act.
Roadside management might be the key to breathe life into the monarch population. Researchers from Oklahoma State University and the Department of Transportation are looking for solutions. Kristen Baum is an associate professor in the Department of Integrated Biology at OSU.
I'm working with Dennis Martin, who's with the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture, looking at mowing regimes. And so we're interested in what the timing and frequency of mowing does to milkweed availability for monarchs.
Monarch butterflies love milkweed. They lay their eggs in the plant and the caterpillars then feed off of it. Milkweed is abundant in pastures and along roadsides, but is typically mowed over, consequently leaving a void for monarchs.
So certainly there's aspects of mowing and roadsides that are extremely necessary. So for example, mowing the safety zone. And so that would be from the roadside over a distance. So that way when motorists need to pull over, or if you think around turns and at interchanges and things like that. So there's some parts of the roadside mowing that are not being considered for change.
While safety zones need mowing, a common practice is to mow beyond the safety zone and wider roadsides. Extension turfgrass specialist Dennis Martin has worked with ODOT in vegetation research and extension initiatives for 26 years. 2 years ago, Martin put in a proposal to ODOT to see if it could alter its mowing practices outside the safety zones.
Outside that clear zone or safety zone, they can try to improve habitat for pollinators such as the monarch. Not all of that area outside of there is suitable for use in habitat. Some of it contains a lot of invasive species, but some areas are quite high quality and can be worked with.
Well, ODOT has an interest in the monarch butterfly in that we don't want to see it become an endangered species. Just from a practical highway business standpoint, that would impact our highway programs because, like anytime we impact habitat for an endangered species, environmental issues come up with our projects, and we could perhaps have to start buying habitat or creating habitat if it were to become a listed species.
Mirth says ODOT jumped at Martin's proposal, and workers delayed mowing this summer when the monarchs moved through and set aside these plots near the university for Baum and Martin's research. It turns out other pollinators may also benefit.
So it's hard to put a value on one particular species. And so the monarch is a very iconic insect. It's one that's very well known, and you know, pretty much everybody you talk to has a monarch story about, you know, how they used to see, you know, tons, or they saw a roosting site where they kind of aggregate in the trees during migration. And so it's a species that a lot of people can relate to, and some of the practices and changes in management that we can do that would benefit monarchs could benefit a lot of other species as well.
But it's also an opportunity for improving things for posterity. It's a species that we can save, and it just requires a few tweaks of our management practices and habitat, not only improvement of habitat, but also habitat maintenance, and we can fix this problem.
The Monarch Research Project is a multi-year study that is just getting started. And though there are still a ton of questions left up in the air, scientists hope the results will keep the monarchs up there too. In Payne County, I'm Curtis Hare.
Finally today, we're learning about Made in Oklahoma products at the Oklahoma State Fair.
Well, we have the Made in Oklahoma store out here at the Oklahoma State Fair, which is a partnership between the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture and the Oklahoma State Fair. This is the third year for the store. We've expanded each year. We have over 75 different Made in Oklahoma products featured out here at the store this year.
The candles are made out of food grade. The fair is interesting because all the people from our community come out to the fair. And so these are people that we may not be able to reach otherwise. So it's a nice way for us to get our message out about having healthier products, a better lotion without the chemicals, a safer candle, better soap without detergents. It's a nice way to elevate the awareness of products, all of our products that are made in Oklahoma.
Gives us an opportunity to expose our jellies to a number of folks and the traffic. But you get a lot of traffic through here, as you can tell. But basically, it's just a lot of fun to see people and talk to them about coming from all around the state and so forth.
Well, the Made in Oklahoma section, these are all people who live in Oklahoma and have products that they make in Oklahoma. So you're supporting your own farmers, your own neighbors, if you will.
You know, it seems like more and more these days people are looking to purchase local. You're supporting your neighbors. You actually may know the person that's making the bar of soap or making the salsa. So it's just it's a goodwill and important for the local economy.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. From the State Fair in Oklahoma City, I'm Lyndall Stout. Remember, Oklahoma Ag starts at sunup.